when she overheard her in-laws' shocking plans. A powerful CEO took matters into her own hands. Here's what happened next. The dream life shattered. Samantha Green sat at her desk in the sleek glass-walled office overlooking the sprawling city skyline. It was early morning, and the soft glow of the rising sun filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows across the room. The sound of the city was faint, just a murmur in the background as she focused on her work. For most, it was the start of a new day full of endless possibilities. But for Samantha, it felt like the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter she never thought she would have to write. Her company, Green Technologies, was thriving. She had inherited it from her father, a man who had built the business from the ground up. Samantha had spent years proving herself worthy of taking over his legacy. As a woman in a male-dominated industry, every achievement, every success had been hard-earned. But now she stood at the helm of a billion-dollar tech empire respected and admired by her peers. She had everything she had ever dreamed of: the career, the luxury, the freedom. And yet her marriage to Ryan was the one thing that didn't seem to fit into this perfect picture. Samantha had always been driven, ambitious, and focused. She didn't have time for distractions, especially when it came to relationships. But then Ryan had entered her life like a whirlwind. They met at a corporate event where she was speaking to a room full of investors. Ryan had been in the audience, a charming, well-dressed man with a soft smile and an easy way about him. He had been respectful of her space, not interrupting her presentation, and after the event he'd approached her with genuine interest about her work, not just her appearance. At first Samantha wasn't interested. She had no time for a relationship, especially not with someone in her field, but Ryan persisted. He wasn't pushy though, just patient. He respected her drive and admired her determination. It was refreshing to meet a man who didn't try to compete with her, but instead supported her ambitions. Slowly, he chipped away at her walls, and after months of casual meetings and friendly dinners, Samantha found herself falling in love. They married quickly, swept up in the romance of it all. For the first few years, things were perfect. They traveled, celebrated milestones, and supported each other's careers. Samantha thought she had found the perfect partner. But now, as she sat at her desk, staring at the papers in front of her, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was during a family dinner at Ryan's parents' house that everything began to unravel. Samantha had always gotten along with her in-laws. Ryan's mother, Paige, was a kind woman, and his father, Philip, was a quiet man who kept to himself. They were a traditional family, well-established, and at first glance seemed like the perfect in-laws. But lately things had felt strained between them. Ryan had been more distant than usual, and the pressure of managing the company had left Samantha feeling disconnected from her personal life. That evening, Ryan had insisted they join his parents for dinner. He said it would be good for them to spend more time with family to reconnect. Samantha agreed, although she had a nagging feeling in her gut. She hadn't felt truly happy in her marriage for some time. The warmth they once shared seemed to have faded, replaced by tension and unspoken words. She tried to push the feeling aside, convincing herself that it was just the stress of work and the constant juggling act of being a CEO and a wife. But that night, everything changed. As Samantha walked through the garage to retrieve a bag of groceries she had left in the car, she noticed the voices. At first, they were faint, but as she got closer, they became clearer. She paused, unsure whether to step outside or return to the house. Her heart skipped a beat as she recognized the voices, Ryan's, Paige's, and Philip's. They were speaking in low tones, too quiet for her to hear every word, but just loud enough for her to catch the most shocking part of their conversation. "I never thought she'd be the one." Paige's voice was filled with frustration. "But it's clear now. She can't even give him a child. What's the point of staying married to her?" Samantha's heart dropped. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her stomach twisted into a knot. Her mother-in-law was talking about their marriage, about the fact that she hadn't been able to have children. Philip's voice was calm, almost dismissive. "She married into wealth. What good is it if she can't provide an heir to the family name? It's time for Ryan to move on." Ryan's voice came next, low but unmistakably cold. I thought I could make it work. I really did. But now it's just too much. If I stay married to her, I'll never get what I need. The business, the money. She's holding me back. She doesn't even know how to prioritize what matters. Samantha's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to move to confront them, but her legs were frozen in place. She stood there, hidden in the shadows of the garage, her mind racing. Ryan, the man she had loved, the man she had trusted, was planning something far worse than she could have ever imagined. It wasn't just about her inability to have children. It was about something deeper, something much darker. The words that followed only deepened her shock. "I've been talking to someone." Ryan's voice was almost a whisper now. "I'm thinking of making a change. There's someone else, someone younger. She can give me what I need and she won't keep me from what I deserve." The last words hit Samantha like a punch to the gut. She wanted to scream, to run back into the house and confront Ryan, but she couldn't. She felt paralyzed, trapped by the overwhelming sense of betrayal. Samantha stood there in silence for what felt like an eternity, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew she should confront them, expose the lies, but she didn't know if she was ready for the storm that would follow. How could she face Ryan? How could she even look at him after what she had just heard? Her mind raced, replaying the conversation over and over. She felt sick, both physically and emotionally. Her perfect life, the life she had worked so hard to build, was crumbling before her eyes. As the voices grew quieter, Samantha slowly backed away, careful not to make a sound. She returned to the house where the dinner was already being served. Ryan smiled at her, his expression unchanged, unaware of the betrayal that had just occurred. Samantha forced a smile back. But deep inside, everything was falling apart. Dinner passed in uncomfortable silence. The tension between Samantha and Ryan was palpable, but neither of them spoke of the conversation she had overheard. They went through the motions, pretending like everything was fine, but Samantha couldn't shake the feeling that her entire world had just shifted. Later that night, as they lay in bed, Ryan reached out to her, but Samantha pulled away. She couldn't look at him, couldn't feel his touch. The man she had loved, the man she had trusted with everything, was a stranger to her now. He had lied to her, betrayed her in the most fundamental way. Samantha turned to face the wall, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill over. Her heart ached, but there was something else, something stronger: anger, determination. She wasn't going to let Ryan or his family destroy her. She had worked too hard to get where she was, and she wasn't going to let anyone take that away from her. Tomorrow she would make a decision. But for tonight, she just had to get through it. The aftermath of betrayal. Samantha could hardly believe the conversation she had overheard. The words kept replaying in her mind, like an endless loop that she couldn't escape from. She can't even give him a child. What's the point of staying married to her? The voice of her mother-in-law, Paige, echoed in her ears. The reality of what she had just learned felt like a nightmare, one that she couldn't wake up from. As the night passed, her thoughts were consumed by a deep, unshakable sense of betrayal. The man she loved, the man she had trusted, was planning something unspeakable behind her back. He was using her just as his family had always suspected. Only now she could see it with clear eyes. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling as Ryan slept beside her. His steady breathing felt distant, like he was a stranger she had only just met. She felt nothing but a cold emptiness where her love for him used to be. She tried to make sense of the situation, but nothing made sense. How could I have been so blind, she asked herself. How could I have missed the signs? She knew they had been drifting apart, but she had always chalked it up to the pressures of work, the demands of running her company. She never imagined it was something more, something as sinister as this. As the hours dragged on, sleep never came. Samantha spent the night tossing and turning her mind, racing her body restless. Every time she closed her eyes, all she could see was the image of Ryan's face, calm and unaffected, while his family schemed in the background. He wasn't just unfaithful, he was calculating, manipulative, and selfish. The thought of spending another night in this house with him, pretending everything was fine, made her stomach turn. She needed to get out, needed to process everything she had just learned and decide what to do next. By morning, Samantha was exhausted both physically and emotionally. She forced herself out of bed and went through the motions of getting ready for work. The routine felt hollow, as though the world had continued on without her, while her life had been turned upside down. She put on her clothes, her makeup, and tried to appear composed, but the truth was, she felt like she was suffocating. As she walked down the stairs and into the kitchen, Ryan was already sitting at the table sipping his coffee. He didn't seem any different. He looked at her with the same casual affection, as if everything was normal. "Good morning, Sam," he said, his voice too cheerful for the moment. "Did you sleep okay?" Samantha nodded, though she felt like she was choking on the lie. "Yeah, fine," she muttered, her voice flat. She sat down across from him, but the space between them felt like a chasm. How could she sit here with him knowing what she knew? How could she pretend everything was fine when her entire world had shattered? Ryan didn't notice the tension. He was too caught up in his own thoughts. "You're still looking at those quarterly reports, huh? The board's been asking about those figures again. Maybe we could talk about it over dinner tonight." He flashed her a smile, but it only made her stomach twist. Dinner, the same word he had used last night to plan their little talk with his family. She forced a smile, even though it felt like the most unnatural thing in the world. "Sure, let's talk about it later." Her heart wasn't in it. It wasn't in anything anymore. As the day dragged on, Samantha found herself spiraling. Every little thing seemed to remind her of how much she had been deceived. Ryan had played her, used her for his own benefit, and now he wanted her to believe that everything was fine. She couldn't even bear to look at him without feeling nauseous. How had she let herself get so caught up in this? Her career, her wealth, her accomplishments, they all seemed so insignificant now. All of it felt like a facade, a life built on lies. After a long day at work, Samantha returned home, but she couldn't face Ryan again, not tonight. She had already decided that something had to change, and she needed time to think about her next steps. She texted him, telling him there was a sudden meeting she had to attend for the business and that she'd be working late. The message was a convenient excuse, one that would give her some time to think. She drove to her office, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. There was so much to consider, so much to plan. She could confront Ryan immediately, but she knew she had to be smart about this. She had to think things through. She had worked too hard for everything she had, her career, her company, the life she had built. She wasn't going to let him take it all away. Samantha sat in her office staring at her desk, feeling the weight of the decision ahead of her. She couldn't let Ryan get away with this. He had betrayed her in the worst possible way, and if she wanted to protect herself, she would have to fight back. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that staying with Ryan was no longer an option. She had to get out of this marriage, but how? Divorce seemed like the only answer. But it wasn't that simple. Ryan had connections, money, and influence. He would fight her every step of the way. But that didn't scare her. Samantha had always been a fighter. She'd built her empire from the ground up, and she wasn't going to let anyone tear it down. Not even Ryan. The next morning, after a sleepless night of planning, Samantha met with her lawyer. She wasn't sure exactly what she was going to do yet, but she knew one thing: she needed to get her financials in order. She needed to protect her assets. If Ryan thought he could take her business, he was wrong. She had worked too hard to let it all slip away. Jennifer. Her lawyer listened attentively as Samantha explained the situation. Jennifer's eyes narrowed with understanding as Samantha went through the details. "You need to act quickly," Jennifer advised. "I'll make sure we have everything in place for you. But we'll need to be strategic. You don't want to give Ryan any more ammunition." Samantha nodded, feeling a sense of clarity for the first time in days. She wasn't going to let Ryan control her life any longer. She was going to take control of her future, and she would do whatever it took to protect herself and the business she had built. As she left the lawyer's office, Samantha's resolve hardened. She knew she couldn't trust Ryan anymore. The man she had married, the man she thought she knew, was gone, and now it was time for her to move on her terms. But just as she was walking out, she received a text from Ryan. We need to talk. Can we meet tonight? She stared at the message, her fingers hovering over the screen. She could feel the anger bubbling up inside her, but she didn't respond. Not yet. She needed time. She needed space to think. Tonight would come soon enough, and when it did, she would be ready, gathering the peace. Samantha stood by the large windows of her office looking out over the city. The skyline shimmered in the morning light, but her mind was far from the beauty outside. Instead, her thoughts were consumed by the conversation she had overheard and the decision she had made in the days following. She had made up her mind she was going to take control of her life no matter the cost. But that didn't mean she could act hastily. She had to be smart, calculated. Ryan had no idea that his world was about to come crashing down. She was going to make sure of that. As she sat at her desk, she couldn't help but think about the months, the years they had spent together. For so long, she had thought their marriage was built on mutual love and respect. But now everything felt like a lie. The trust, the moments of tenderness, the promises they all just part of a carefully constructed facade. How had she missed the signs? More importantly, how had she allowed herself to fall so deeply into a relationship where manipulation and deceit were at the core? Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from her lawyer, Jennifer. I've reviewed the financials. We need to start the process of securing your assets and setting up your defenses. We need to meet ASAP. Samantha immediately responded, her fingers moving quickly over the keys. Let's meet tomorrow morning, I'll be there. The lawyer's quick response came back almost immediately. Good, let's get everything in place before Ryan suspects anything. Samantha leaned back in her chair, running her hands through her hair. She had always been prepared for business challenges, always kept her personal life separate from her work. But this was different. This was a fight for her life, her future, and her legacy. She had spent years building green technologies, and she wasn't going to let some conniving man and his manipulative family destroy everything she had worked so hard for. The next day, Samantha sat across from Jennifer in a small, dimly lit conference room at her lawyer's office. Jennifer had always been her trusted confidant in business matters, and now she was the only person Samantha felt she could fully trust with the truth of what was happening in her marriage. I've been going through everything, Jennifer said, sliding a folder across the table to Samantha. Your company's financials are solid. We need to make sure that Ryan can't get his hands on any of it without your consent. If you go the divorce route, you'll need to secure all your assets, including your intellectual property, and make sure he can't access your accounts. That includes the house, the business, and any other investments. Samantha nodded, her thoughts already racing ahead. I've been thinking about that, she said, her voice steady. But I also need to make sure he can't try to manipulate his way into getting part of my company. I've spent years building it, and I'm not going to let him destroy everything. Jennifer's gaze softened with sympathy, but there was a steely resolve in her eyes. I know, and we're going to make sure that doesn't happen, but we need to move quickly. If Ryan is already planning his next move, we don't want to give him any room to execute it. Samantha's mind was spinning. There were so many things to consider, so many pieces to move. She had worked hard to get where she was, to earn the respect of her colleagues and employees, and now it felt like everything was hanging in the balance. She couldn't afford to let Ryan's betrayal destroy everything. In the days that followed, Samantha threw herself into securing her assets and preparing for the legal battle ahead. She spent hours going through contracts, meeting with her business managers, and reviewing the company's investments. But amidst all the chaos, she found something unexpected, an ally. Daniel, the quiet and thoughtful man, who had worked as her driver during her recent trips, had become a consistent presence in her life over the past few months. He had always been professional, never pushing for more than what was necessary, but there was something about him that Samantha had come to admire. He was reliable, trustworthy, and kind. One day, as she was leaving her office to head home, she spotted him standing by the door. He wasn't her usual driver, but something in his eyes made her stop. I've been thinking. Daniel began, looking a bit hesitant. I know things have been difficult lately, but I want you to know that if you ever need anything, if you need help with anything, I'm here for you. I've always respected you, and I know you're going through a lot right now." Samantha was taken aback by his words. It wasn't just that he was offering his help. It was the sincerity in his tone, the way he looked at her like he actually cared. It had been a long time since anyone had offered her help without expecting something in return. "Thank you, Daniel," she said, her voice soft but appreciative. I don't know what I would have done without you, but I don't want to burden you with my problems." "You're not a burden," he replied firmly. "I know it's not easy, but I can help if you need me. You've been so strong, but everyone needs someone in their corner." Samantha nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. It was strange, but Daniel's offer felt like a lifeline, someone who wasn't trying to manipulate her or take something from her, but simply wanted to support her. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't completely alone in this. As the days passed, Samantha continued her preparations. She secured her assets, made arrangements for her company's future, and started to distance herself from Ryan. Each conversation with him felt colder, more distant. He seemed oblivious to the growing tension between them, continuing to act as if nothing was wrong. But Samantha was far from blind. She could see through his act the facade of concern and affection. Every word he spoke felt like a lie. Every smile he gave her seemed hollow. One evening, Ryan asked her again about the divorce, as if he didn't realize the gravity of the situation. "You know, Sam," he said casually, "I think we could work this out. Maybe we just need some space, a little time to think things over. It's not too late for us to fix things. Don't you think?" Samantha stared at him, her heart pounding. How could he stand there and say that after everything she had heard? How could he act like nothing had happened? She forced a smile, her voice calm but firm. "I think it's too late, Ryan. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again. You've already made your intentions clear." Ryan's face faltered for a moment, but he quickly masked his emotions. "What are you talking about?" Samantha didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. She had made her decision. The plan comes together. Samantha sat at her desk surrounded by a mountain of paperwork, but her mind was elsewhere. The meeting with Jennifer had given her a clear direction. She had to be decisive, swift and unyielding in the face of what was to come. She had spent years building her business, earning the respect of her colleagues and clients, and she wasn't going to let Ryan's betrayal tear it all down. Every document, every decision made in the next few weeks would shape her future. She could no longer afford to pretend things were fine, to smile and play along with Ryan's carefully constructed lies. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a text from Daniel, her unexpected ally. He had become a steady presence in her life over the past few weeks, and though she tried not to get too emotionally attached, his quiet support was a source of comfort. "Do you need anything today? I'm free after work if you need to talk." Samantha smiled softly at the message. She didn't often reach out to people, but for some reason she found herself trusting Daniel. He hadn't asked for anything from her, and that was rare in her world. She quickly typed back, "I'm okay for now, but thank you." She was grateful, but there was still so much to do. The hours were slipping by, and the walls of her office felt like they were closing in on her. There was no turning back now. She was too deep in this, too far along in her plans to hesitate. The next few days were a blur. Samantha worked tirelessly, setting everything in motion. She contacted her accountants to ensure that her financial accounts were locked down tight. She met with her trusted advisors to secure her intellectual property, making sure Ryan couldn't claim any part of her company. She had already started the legal process of separating their assets, but she needed to ensure that no hidden clauses or surprises would come back to haunt her. Every conversation she had, every email she sent was calculated. She wasn't playing the victim anymore. She wasn't going to stand idly by and let Ryan walk all over her. This was her battle, and she was going to win it. Meanwhile, Ryan remained oblivious. He still texted her, still tried to convince her to work things out, still pretended like everything was normal. Samantha had to bite her tongue, forcing herself to reply with neutral, non-committal responses. "I need some time to think," she'd say. "We'll talk about it later." His messages became more desperate as the days went on. The more she ignored him, the more his messages grew frantic, his tone pleading, "Please, Sam, don't shut me out. We can fix this." It made her sick to her stomach, but she couldn't let it distract her. She had to stay focused. The day of her meeting with Jennifer arrived, and Samantha walked into the law office with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in a long time. It was time to make everything official. "I've got everything we need," Jennifer said, handing over a thick stack of papers. "I've already started the preliminary work on the divorce, and I've secured your business interests. Ryan won't be able to touch anything you've built." Samantha nodded, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. But that relief was fleeting. The hard part was just beginning. "What about him?" Samantha asked, her voice steady but edged with anger. "What's his next move?" Jennifer glanced at her briefly, her expression neutral but sharp. "I can't predict exactly what Ryan will do, but I can tell you this: he's not going to give up easily. He will fight you for everything. You have to be prepared for that." Samantha's jaw tightened. She had expected no less. She knew Ryan would do whatever it took to try to manipulate the situation in his favor. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She would fight back. "Then I'll make sure he loses," she said firmly, the words coming out with a finality that surprised even her. Jennifer raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. "Good," she said. "That's exactly the attitude you need to have." Leaving the law office, Samantha felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She had done everything she could to protect herself to ensure her future. But now it was time to turn her attention to Ryan. The confrontation was inevitable, but she wasn't going to let it happen on his terms. She would take control, make him face the consequences of his actions. The thought of confronting him, of seeing the look on his face when she told him the marriage was over, made her stomach turn. But it was necessary. She couldn't let him get away with this. Over the next few days, Samantha found herself at the office even more than usual, pouring herself into work as a distraction. But even in the midst of meetings and decisions, her mind kept drifting back to Ryan, to the conversation she had overheard, to the cruel plans he and his family had made. How could I have been so blind, she wondered again. How could I have trusted him? But in the midst of this turmoil, Samantha also realized something important. She had worked too hard to get where she was. To let someone like Ryan destroy everything would be a betrayal of herself, of her dreams. No matter how this turned out, she was going to keep moving forward. It was then that she received a text from Daniel. "I know this is a difficult time for you, but if you need anything, I'm here. You don't have to do this alone." Samantha looked at the message for a moment before replying. "Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate it more than you know." There was something about his steady presence that comforted her. Maybe it was his quiet strength, or maybe it was the fact that he didn't want anything from her. Either way, it felt like she had someone in her corner for the first time in a long while. Later that evening, after another tense, silent dinner with Ryan, Samantha retreated to her office, her mind consumed by the thought of how to end this chapter of her life. She had already made the decision, but she needed closure. She needed to know that this was truly the right choice. She went over everything in her mind, the plans Ryan had made with his family, his lies, his betrayals. No, there was no going back. This marriage had been over long before she had overheard their conversation, but now it was time to make it official. The next day she texted Ryan, "We need to talk." Samantha knew this conversation would change everything. She had no idea what Ryan would say, but she knew one thing: the man she thought she knew was gone. The man sitting across from her was a stranger, and now she was done pretending otherwise. Confrontation and courage. The day had arrived. Samantha stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her blouse with a steadiness she didn't truly feel. Her hands were clammy, her stomach twisted into knots, but she had made up her mind. There was no turning back now. The person she had once been, the woman who had been loyal, trusting and devoted, no longer existed. What stood before the mirror now was a woman who had seen the truth, a woman who had chosen to take control of her life. Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence in the room. It was a message from Ryan. "Can we talk later tonight? I know things have been rough, but I don't want to give up on us. I still love you." Samantha stared at the words, her anger bubbling to the surface. "Still love you," she thought bitterly. After everything. She took a deep breath and placed the phone down on her desk, forcing herself to remain calm. This was it, the moment she would finally put an end to this twisted farce of a marriage. She knew it would be difficult. Confronting him would expose all the raw, painful truths she had been trying to avoid. But she had no other choice. The life she had built, the person she had become, couldn't survive the way things were. There could be no more pretending. As she headed downstairs, the familiar scent of Ryan's cologne lingered in the air, making her stomach churn. He was already at the kitchen table, sipping his coffee like nothing had changed. His back was turned to her as he looked out the window, lost in thought. She paused for a moment, gathering her composure. She had rehearsed the words 1,000 times, but now that the moment was here, it felt like her throat was closing up. Still, she stepped forward, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. "Ryan," she said, her voice steady, but carrying the weight of everything she had been holding in. He turned toward her, his face lighting up with a small, hopeful smile. "Hey, Sam, you okay?" "You look—" "I'm fine," she interrupted, her voice firm. "We need to talk. It's time to face the truth." Ryan's smile faltered and his brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean? Is everything okay?" Samantha took a deep breath. This was it. She couldn't hide from it any longer. "No, Ryan. Everything is not okay." She leaned against the counter, steadying herself. "I know what you've been planning. I overheard your conversation with your parents. I know everything about you wanting to get rid of me, about your affair, about your plans to take my business and ruin everything I've worked for." Ryan's face went pale, and for a moment he looked like a deer caught in headlights. He opened his mouth to speak, but Samantha cut him off, her words coming faster now, each one more painful than the last. "I'm not stupid, Ryan. You and your family have been using me, manipulating me from the very start. I've been nothing but a pawn in your game, and I won't stand for it anymore." Her voice cracked for the briefest moment, but she quickly regained control. "I'm done. This marriage is over." The silence in the room was deafening. Ryan looked at her, his lips trembling as if he was trying to process what she was saying. But Samantha wasn't done. She wasn't going to let him twist this anymore. She wasn't going to let him play the victim. "I know about Emma," she continued, her eyes hardening. "I know you've been seeing her behind my back. I've heard enough to know that I'm nothing more than a means to an end for you. You don't love me, you never did, and I won't let you tear apart everything I've built just because you can't stand to lose your grip on me." Ryan's face turned red with anger. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor as he took a step toward her. "How dare you accuse me of that?" he spat. "You have no idea what you're talking about. I didn't—" "Don't lie to me, Ryan," Samantha interrupted, her voice cold as ice. "I heard you. I heard everything. Don't try to manipulate me with your lies. You're not going to talk your way out of this." Ryan froze, his anger faltering as he took a step back. For a moment, it looked like he might collapse. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said, his voice a mix of frustration and guilt. I thought things would be better for both of us if we—" Samantha shook her head. "Stop! Ryan, just stop!" She took a deep breath, trying to steady her emotions. "I don't want your apologies. I don't need your excuses. I've made up my mind. I'm getting a divorce, and I'm not going to let you or anyone else take a single thing from me." Ryan stood there motionless as the reality of the situation began to sink in. The anger, the manipulation, the lies. It had all come crumbling down in an instant. He opened his mouth to say something, but no words came. Samantha could see the panic in his eyes, the desperation. But she wasn't going to let that sway her. She had spent far too long putting herself last, sacrificing everything to keep up this illusion of a perfect life. She had been blind, but now she saw clearly, and now she was done. She was taking control, and no one was going to stop her. "I'm filing the papers tomorrow," she said, her voice final. "And don't try to stop me. I've already protected everything I care about. You'll get nothing from me." Ryan took a step back, his face ashen. He looked like he was about to say something, but then he closed his mouth. For the first time, Samantha saw him as he truly was. Weak, cowardly, and not the man she had once trusted. "Goodbye, Ryan," she said, her tone cold. "I hope you find what you're looking for, but it won't be with me." With that, she turned and walked out of the room, not looking back. The rest of the day passed in a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and meetings, but Samantha couldn't stop replaying the conversation in her mind. The weight of what she had just done began to settle on her shoulders. She had confronted Ryan, but the battle wasn't over. The legal process had just begun, and she knew the road ahead would be long and painful, but she also knew one thing: she was no longer the woman who had been trapped in a lie. She was the woman who had chosen her own path. Later that evening, as she sat alone in her office, the phone rang. It was from Daniel. "Hey, Sam?" His voice was warm and comforting, a stark contrast to the cold tension that had surrounded her all day. "I just wanted to check in. Are you okay?" Samantha smiled despite herself. "I'm okay, Daniel. Really? I think I finally made the right choice." "I'm glad to hear that," Daniel replied. "If you need anything at all, just let me know I'm here." Samantha felt a surge of gratitude. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel so alone. Daniel wasn't asking for anything from her. He just wanted to help. And in that moment, she realized that she didn't need to carry this burden alone anymore. She had allies. She had a future, and she was going to take control of it. The battle begins. The days that followed Samantha's confrontation with Ryan felt like a blur of emotions and decisions. She had finally taken the first step in freeing herself from the toxic marriage, but she knew this was only the beginning of a long and difficult journey. The legal proceedings, the inevitable fight for her business, and the constant reminders of Ryan's betrayal were all weighing heavily on her mind. Yet there was also a sense of clarity, a feeling of empowerment she had never experienced before. Samantha's office had become her sanctuary. It was where she felt most herself, surrounded by the walls that represented her achievements and her hard work. It was the one place where she could escape from the constant noise of her personal life and focus on what truly mattered: the future. She'd already met with Jennifer, her lawyer, to start the divorce proceedings, but the real battle would be fought over her company and the assets she had worked tirelessly to build. Ryan, she knew, wasn't going to go down without a fight. He would try to manipulate the situation to twist the narrative and use every advantage he had. But Samantha wasn't afraid. She had spent years building green technologies, and no one, certainly not Ryan, was going to take that away from her. That evening, as she sat in her office preparing for a board meeting, the phone buzzed on her desk. It was a text from Daniel. "I know you've got a lot on your plate right now, but if you need to talk, I'm here, anytime." Samantha stared at the message for a long moment, unsure of what to feel. It had been a few days since their last conversation, and she had found herself thinking about him more than she cared to admit. His quiet support had been a lifeline during these turbulent times, but part of her felt conflicted. She didn't want to drag him into her mess. She had enough problems to deal with on her own. Yet there was something in his message that made her smile. He wasn't asking for anything, he just wanted to be there. She quickly typed back, "Thank you, Daniel. I'll be okay. I just need some time to focus." She felt guilty for pushing him away, but she couldn't risk opening herself up to anyone right now. She needed to stay focused on the battle ahead. She couldn't afford distractions. Later that night, as she lay in bed, the silence of the house was deafening. The absence of Ryan's presence was a stark reminder of the life she had once thought she had. But now, as she stared up at the ceiling, her thoughts began to shift. There was no going back. She was stronger than she had ever been, and she wasn't going to let anyone control her again. The divorce proceedings were underway, but her company was the true battleground. She could feel the pressure mounting. Ryan would fight her for everything he could get, But she had already made the decision. She wasn't going to give him a single thing. The next morning, Samantha woke up early, the weight of the day's tasks heavy on her mind. She had a meeting with her CFO, Trevor, to discuss the future of green technologies, and she needed to make sure everything was in place. Her team had already started working on securing new contracts, and she had been pushing them to expand into new markets. The business was her lifeblood, and she wasn't going to let Ryan's schemes ruin it. The meeting went smoothly, and Trevor reassured her that their financials were secure, but she couldn't shake the nagging feeling in her gut that something was still lurking, something she hadn't accounted for. Ryan had connections, and he wasn't the type to give up easily. Samantha knew she had to stay one step ahead, but the thought of what he was capable of made her uneasy. Later that afternoon, she received a call from Jennifer. "We need to discuss the next steps in the divorce," Jennifer said, her voice steady and professional. "I've been in contact with Ryan's attorney, and they're already trying to push for a settlement. They're offering you a lump sum, but they want joint custody of the company. It's clear they think you'll cave under pressure." Samantha's blood boiled at the thought. Joint custody of the company. Ryan had no right to any part of her business. "I won't give him a single penny. I've worked too hard for this," Samantha said, her voice firm with resolve. "I'm not agreeing to anything without a fight." Jennifer's tone softened. "I agree. But we need to be prepared. They're going to drag this out. Ryan will try to play the victim, and he'll use everything in his power to make you look unreasonable." "I'm not afraid of him," Samantha said coldly. "Let him try. I'm done being the one who bends. This time he'll be the one who loses." Samantha spent the next few days reviewing contracts, organizing legal paperwork, and meeting with her business advisors. She wasn't going to let Ryan's manipulations distract her. She had worked too long and too hard to build this empire, and she wasn't going to let anyone, least of all her ex-husband, take it away from her. As the days wore on, the pressure continued to mount. Ryan's legal team was relentless, bombarding her with offers and demands, trying to chip away at her resolve. They were making it clear that they wanted her to settle, to give up some of her power in exchange for a quick resolution. But Samantha wouldn't budge. Every time they came at her, she stood her ground. She knew this was the fight of her life, and she wasn't going to lose. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Samantha found herself back in her office, poring over more documents. Her phone buzzed, and for a brief moment, she thought it was another message from Ryan. But when she looked down, she saw it was from Daniel. "I know it's late, but I wanted to check in. Are you doing okay?" Samantha stared at the message, her heart skipping a beat. She had tried to push him out of her mind, but there was something about his kindness that pulled her in. She quickly typed back, "I'm fine, just swamped with work. Thanks for checking in." A few minutes later, her phone buzzed again. "If you ever need a break, or if you just need someone to talk to, I'm here." Samantha paused for a moment, her fingers hovering over the keys. She had been so focused on the battle that she hadn't allowed herself to think about anything else. But maybe it was time. Maybe it was time to let someone in, just for a moment. She typed back, "Thanks, Daniel. I might take you up on that soon." For the first time in a long while, a small sense of peace washed over her. She wasn't alone in this. She had people who cared, people who were on her side. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for her future, her legacy, and her happiness, and she was going to win. The next few days were a blur of legal meetings, phone calls, and constant strategizing. But as the battle over green technologies continued to escalate, Samantha felt more certain of her path. She had already made the hard decision to fight for everything she had worked for, and nothing. No one was going to stand in her way. Ryan could try to tear her down, his family could attempt to manipulate her, but in the end, it was her strength, her resolve, and her determination that would carry her through. The final showdown. The pressure was unbearable. Samantha had never felt so weighed down in her life. Every email, every phone call, every meeting was another reminder of the battle she was in. The stakes had never been higher. The legal fight for her company, the legacy of her late father, was now her sole focus. every decision she made felt monumental, as though each one could shift the balance of power in this war between her and Ryan. But there was no turning back now. She had crossed the point of no return the moment she overheard that conversation. The moment she knew Ryan's true intentions. As the days turned into weeks, the fight grew more intense. Ryan's legal team was relentless, using every dirty trick they could think of to wear her down. They tried to paint her as the unreasonable one, the heartless businesswoman more interested in her career than her family. They argued that she was hiding assets, that she was trying to deprive Ryan of what was rightfully his. But Samantha didn't flinch. She knew the truth, and she wasn't going to let anyone twist it. She had spent years building green technologies into a global powerhouse, and no one, not even her ex-husband, was going to take that away from her. Every day she had to walk a fine line. She had to be strong, decisive, and focused on her business while navigating the emotional minefield of the divorce. But even with all the pressure, Samantha found herself strangely calm. The anger that had once consumed her had been replaced with determination. She had nothing left to lose, and that gave her an unexpected kind of freedom. The more Ryan and his family tried to break her down, the more determined she became. She had no illusions about the man she had married. He wasn't the man she thought he was. He wasn't the man she had fallen in love with. He was a stranger, someone she had trusted far too long. But now that trust was gone. Samantha's phone buzzed one morning as she was sitting in her office reviewing documents for an upcoming meeting with her board of directors. She picked it up, glancing at the screen. It was a message from Jennifer. "We're moving forward with the court filings today. Ryan's legal team is pushing hard for joint custody of the company, but we're not backing down. I'll update you after the filing is done." Samantha's stomach tightened. She had expected this joint custody of the company. It was the one thing Ryan had been insisting on, the one thing he wouldn't let go of. He had no right to any part of Green Technologies. It was hers, built by her and her father. She had no intention of sharing it with him, no matter what it took. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a knock at her door. Trevor, her CFO, stepped inside with a stack of papers in his hands. "Samantha," he began, his voice serious. "We need to talk about the board meeting. Ryan's team is going to try to use the recent legal filings against us. They're already spreading rumors that you're hiding assets. I need to know where we stand." Samantha looked up from her desk, meeting his gaze. "We're standing firm," she said, her voice steady. "I won't let him take a single thing from me, Trevor. This company is my life. My father built it with his blood, sweat, and tears, and I won't let Ryan or anyone else tear it down." Trevor nodded, his face grim. "I know, but we need to prepare for the worst. Ryan's not going to go down without a fight. He'll do whatever it takes to make you look like the villain." "I'm not the villain here," Samantha said firmly, standing up from her desk. "He is, and it's time he faces the consequences of his actions. I've already made up my mind, Trevor. We're not backing down." Trevor looked at her with respect. "I know you've got this, Samantha. You've always been a fighter, and we're all behind you." Samantha nodded, her resolve hardening. She wasn't in this alone. Her team, her friends, and even Daniel had shown her that she wasn't the only one fighting. She had the support she needed, but more importantly, she had her own strength, and that was all she needed. Later that day, Jennifer called again. "It's done. We've filed. Ryan's legal team is going to try to drag this out. But we're ready. I've already sent out the initial responses to their claims. It's going to get messy, but we're going to make sure they know you're not backing down." Samantha let out a breath. She hadn't realized she was holding. It was done. The papers were filed. The battle had begun. "Thanks, Jennifer. I'll be ready. Just keep me updated." "Will do," Jennifer replied before hanging up. The next few days felt like a whirlwind. Legal meetings, business meetings, phone calls, emails, every minute was consumed with the fight. Ryan's team was doing everything they could to provoke her, to get her to make a mistake. But Samantha was prepared. She knew their tactics, and she wasn't going to fall for them. Then one evening, as Samantha was leaving her office late again, her phone buzzed once more. This time it was a message from Ryan. "We need to talk." I'm coming over tonight. Samantha stared at the message for a long time, her heart racing. She hadn't seen Ryan in days, and she had no intention of meeting him again, not until the divorce was finalized. She didn't want to give him any more power over her, but part of her felt like this conversation was inevitable. After a moment of hesitation, she typed back, "I'll be home in an hour." When Ryan arrived, he looked different, more desperate, more defeated than she had ever seen him. He walked into her living room without waiting for an invitation, as though he still believed he had a right to be there. He stood in front of her, his arms crossed as though trying to protect himself from the confrontation that was coming. "Samantha," he began, his voice low. "I don't know why you're doing this. You're making a huge mistake. We can still fix this. You know we can. We've been through so much together." Samantha felt a surge of anger rise within her, but she kept her voice steady. "No, Ryan. You've been through a lot, but you've caused all of it. You've lied, you've manipulated me, and now you want to take everything I've worked for. I'm done. You're not going to get away with this. You're not going to use me anymore." Ryan's face twisted with frustration. "You don't understand, Samantha. I didn't want this. I never wanted it to go this far, but you forced my hand." Samantha's heart burned with the realization of how far Ryan had gone to deceive her. She wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break down. "No, Ryan. You've forced this. Not me. You made your choice. Now it's time to deal with the consequences." Ryan took a step closer, his voice rising. "You're not the victim here, Samantha. You never were. You think you're some kind of hero, but you're just as guilty as me. We both wanted different things, and now you're punishing me for that." The words stung, but Samantha refused to let him see how deeply they affected her. "I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting myself, and I'm protecting everything I've worked for." "It's over, Ryan. You need to leave." There was a long pause as Ryan stood there, his jaw clenched, his eyes searching hers for something. Maybe for a sign that she still cared, maybe for a crack in her resolve. But Samantha didn't give him that. She wasn't going to give him anything anymore. Finally, Ryan exhaled sharply, a defeated look on his face. "Fine," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I hope you're happy with your decision." Samantha didn't respond. She simply watched as he turned and walked out of the door, the finality of it sinking in. It was over, the final victory. The days after her confrontation with Ryan were a blur of emotions, but also a time of transformation. Samantha had expected to feel relief after she had told Ryan it was over. Instead, she found herself immersed in a quiet, determined calm that carried her through the final stages of her battle. The divorce proceedings had been set in motion, and the fight over green technologies was in full swing. But as Samantha sat in her office surrounded by her team and the weight of her decisions, she knew one thing for sure: she had reclaimed her life. The following week was one of the most intense of her life. Legal meetings, press conferences, and discussions with her board filled every moment of her day. Ryan had retreated into the background for now, but Samantha knew it wasn't over. He would try to fight her for control of the company, but she was prepared for whatever came next. Every document, every negotiation, every phone call, she approached it all with precision. She was no longer the woman who had been manipulated, controlled, and deceived. She was the CEO of Green Technologies, and she wasn't going to let anyone take that away from her. But even amidst the corporate battle, Samantha found herself struggling with the deeper emotional toll. The love she had once felt for Ryan had turned to bitterness and disappointment. She had spent years believing in their marriage, only to realize that it had been a lie. She had given him her trust, and he had betrayed her. But now she was learning to rebuild that trust, this time in herself. She had been through the storm, and now it was time to rise from the ashes. One evening after a long day of meetings, Samantha sat in her office staring out the window at the city below. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the skyline. It was beautiful, and for the first time in months, Samantha allowed herself to appreciate the view. She had come a long way, and though the road had been painful, she had emerged stronger, more resilient than ever before. The phone on her desk buzzed, and she picked it up without looking at the screen. It was a message from Daniel. "How are you holding up?" Samantha smiled softly at the message. Daniel had been her rock during this entire ordeal, offering his support without ever asking for anything in return. She had been cautious, hesitant to open up to him, but now as she sat there reflecting on everything that had happened, she realized that she didn't have to carry the weight alone anymore. She had people in her life who cared, people she could trust. She quickly typed back, "I'm doing okay, just tired but feeling better each day." The reply came almost instantly. "I'm glad to hear that. If you need anything, you know where to find me." Samantha leaned back in her chair, taking a deep breath. She hadn't allowed herself to think about the future much. The divorce, the legal battles, the business, it had consumed her. But now as she thought about Daniel, something shifted inside her. There was a warmth in her chest, a feeling she hadn't allowed herself to experience in a long time. The next few days passed in a blur of paperwork and negotiations, but Samantha found herself more focused than ever. She had never been more determined to protect her business and her future. Ryan had no idea what he was up against. He could try to tear her down, but Samantha had built herself up too many times to let anyone take her down now. Then came the day when the final decision was made. The judge ruled in her favor. Ryan was entitled to nothing. Green Technologies remained under her control, and the divorce was finalized. The weight that had been pressing on her shoulders for so long finally lifted. It was over. She had won. That evening, as the last of the legal paperwork was signed, Samantha stood in front of her office window looking out at the city below. The skyline looked different now. It wasn't just a view. It was a symbol of everything she had built. She had been through the worst, and now she was finally free. The phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from Daniel. She answered it almost immediately. "Hey, Samantha, I just wanted to say, congratulations. You did it. I'm really proud of you." Samantha's heart skipped a beat. "Thanks, Daniel. It means a lot to hear you say that." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line before Daniel spoke again. "You don't have to do this alone, you know. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here. Always." The sincerity in his voice made Samantha's breath catch in her throat. For a moment she didn't say anything, just letting the words hang in the air. She wasn't sure what she felt, but in that moment she knew that Daniel had been there for her when she needed someone most. She had been through so much, and now she was beginning to see the possibility of something new. "I think I'd like that," she finally said. "I think I'd like to see where this goes." Daniel's voice was soft, almost shy. "I'd like that too." Samantha smiled a genuine smile for the first time in a long while. She had been through hell and come out the other side stronger and more certain of who she was. She wasn't the woman who had been deceived. She wasn't the woman who had been broken. She was someone who had fought for what she deserved and won. And now, for the first time in years, she was allowing herself to think about the future, not just the future of her company, but her own personal future. As the days passed, Samantha found herself leaning into the future with more hope than she had ever thought possible. She wasn't just rebuilding her business, she was rebuilding herself. She had learned the hard way that trust was precious, but she had also learned that it was okay to trust again at her own pace on her own terms. Months later, as she stood on the balcony of her penthouse, looking out over the city that had witnessed both her rise and her fall, Samantha realized that she had finally found peace. She was no longer the woman who had been trapped in a loveless marriage. She was no longer the woman who had let others dictate her worth. She was the woman who had reclaimed her life, and she was ready for whatever came next.